Check Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching on Check TV, YouTube, or the free Check Plus app. Remember, we're continuing the conversation with extra content on the podcast edition, available wherever you get your pods and or casts or all those digital platforms that you might be subscribed on. Lots on the go this week, from BC's decision not to call a stat holiday for the Queen's funeral to the Union of BC Municipalities meeting in Whistler. More controversy also in the BC NDP leadership race. We got a lot to get to. Let's bring in the pod squad this week. Katie and Jillian are away, but we've got a great new guest on the panel this week. Allie Blades, a campaign strategist with MASH Strategy, who's been a senior member of the Andrew Wilkinson and Gavin Dew campaigns for the BC Liberals, and was also second in command under Katie in the Pierre Poilievre campaign here in BC recently. Allie, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you. This is going to be a lot of fun today.
I hope it is, yeah. Jeff, you got to bring the fun. Jeff Ferrier is here. You know him from each and every week. Senior Vice President at Hill & Knowlton and a former senior communications official in the BC NDP government and source of fun and good times. Jeff, thanks for being here.
I do my level best to bring the fun. Welcome, Allie. Great to be here.
Okay, first topic, not a fun topic. John Horgan announced this week that BC will not make the Queen's funeral on September 19th a stat holiday, sort of. BC's public service will get the holiday, including core government workers, Crown Corps, liquor store employees, social workers, healthcare workers, and post-secondary staff, and schools are going to close that day. But everyone else in the private sector, aka the real world, no holiday for you. The immediate reaction, not good, borderline very bad. Parents had days to figure out what they're going to do for childcare when schools are closed Monday, but they're still working. What do we make of this decision, Allie? We'll go to you first. Good, bad, nothing burger. What kind of reaction and mood do you think this sets?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this split. You know, Alberta decided to do a provincial day of mourning, and students are still going to school. Everyone's going to work. They're going to find their own ways to mourn the death and to tune into the funeral, but nothing shuts down. So I quite appreciated that, whereas our 50-50 split is just kind of odd. And, you know, I don't know, I'm not a parent, but finding childcare on such short notice, that's going to be tough. And then let alone the impact to businesses. I mean, I can't wait to see those stats after Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's impacts to everyone with this decision. Jeff, I guess that's why it was somewhat unpopular, kind of communicated in a confusing way. I remember the first hour after this came out, nobody knew what was going on. Half the media reported, hey, we did get a new stat holiday. I think it continues to maybe confuse the heck out of everyone. What went wrong here, and what do you make of the reaction?
Well, I think the outcome of this is a tough one for parents, especially parents with young kids. I got a couple of teenagers, we'll manage okay. But if you've got young ones and you're working in a private sector position, this is not going to be easy for you. I think what this is it's a prime example of the messy reality of governing. You have a situation where federal government creates a surprise holiday. You've got favored nations contracts that have been negotiated with BC public sector unions that guarantee them days off when the federal government gives its workers days off. You got businesses being hurt and breathing down the government's throat saying, please don't shut us down. We can't handle another day off. And you've got, with the schools, a situation where you've got 57 individual unions that you would have to make deals with because they have contracts with government that say they get the day off automatically because of what the government has done. And you've got a news cycle that is really, really short, and you've got to try and figure things out. So the outcome wasn't great for government. It was confusing. It has been tough for parents. But, this is, a tough governing challenge for the government. I'm not sure they're happy with where they landed, but here we are.
Yeah, but of all the groups that you just mentioned to tick off, it seems like middle-class average parents are the one the government would like to tick off least. And I know that they've said they didn't have a choice here on schools. Jeff, you mentioned that there are collective agreements where, because the federal government declared a statutory holiday for the federal civil service, the provincial civil service and some of those unions got it automatically. But interestingly enough, the teachers, the BCTF, did not get this automatically. It was CUPE, the janitors, support staff, bus drivers. I think the choice here could have been government could have simply paid the CUPE workers time and a half to work and keep the schools open, alleviating that pressure on parents. Although, do you think that was a realistic option maybe?
And that's what I was getting at when I was talking about the 57 unions. It's an interesting bargaining situation where it's not individual school boards hold the contracts with workers. So it's not like going to CUPE and saying, hey, we'll pay your workers time and a half to keep the schools open. You'd have to go to 57 locals and get each local to agree to taking money in compensation for not doing something that they're guaranteed in their contract. And I found the opposition opportunism on this interesting. I saw Todd Stone saying, well, this is, the example of how the NDP is willing to put public sector workers and its union friends ahead of everyday working people. And, fair enough, except that thanks to Google, we can see all of the old contracts too. And it was Liberals who actually negotiated these contracts. So I imagine if they were government, they'd be in the same spot as we are now. And interesting fun facts on the Political Capital podcast.
Allie, the end result of all of this is there's lots of people online kind of using, I think, the worst phrase that you can say about a government, which is, how come this government is out of touch? And they don't understand the reasons why. They just understand this stat holiday doesn't apply to them if they're not working for government. How damaging do you think that kind of end result of all of this is?
Yeah, let's go back to the small business aspect, right? Where small businesses are going to potentially find it hard to staff. We just spent the last week in Whistler where staff shortages are everywhere, right? And if they're working for trying to figure out childcare or, anything else, what happens to these businesses? Are they shutting down even though they don't want to and they can't afford to? So this is going to be really tricky.
Okay, let me put you both on the spot. Let's say we're in a vacuum in space. There are no considerations about collective agreements or small businesses or anything else. Should the Queen's funeral day be a stat, do you think? I'll go first and say yes. I think, the death of our head of state, of our monarch, should be a stat holiday. But what do you guys think? In all things equal, without any negatives or positives, should it be, Jeff, do you think?
I don't think so. I have great affection for the Queen.
There we go.
I have great affection for the Queen, but I think that days like the Queen's funeral are a great learning opportunity for British Columbians. I remember when I was a kid, Remembrance Day was not a stat holiday. We learned an awful lot in school that day about the sacrifices of veterans and citizens and impacts of war. We'd have folks come into the school and talk about what it was like when they were in the trenches. And that was really powerful, and it created, lasting learnings that I've carried with me all of my life. And in a perfect world, I'd like to see kids in schools watching the funeral, talking about the monarchy, and talking about some of the challenges associated with colonialism and the monarchy, and particularly the impacts on Indigenous peoples in British Columbia. So, yeah, I'd say no stat holiday.
Okay, great point. Allie, what do you think?
I'm going to have to agree with Jeff on this one. No stat holiday. I think there are different ways that we could honor this moment. And, maybe down the road, it's going to turn into something that we honor in like the Terry Fox run and how that's evolved, right? But I don't think that this is a stat holiday.
Okay, counterpoint. David Beckham spent 12 hours in line in England today to walk past the Queen's coffin. Isn't that a sign of how people seem not energized, but they seem engaged and eager to participate in something on a day of mourning. So that's my only counterpoint, is maybe we could have done something and made it a stat that would have brought people together. I'm not going to stand in line for 12 hours, but also, let's be clear, I'm not David Beckham in any way, shape, or form. But anyways, let's move on to the next topic. The Union of BC Municipalities conference held in Whistler this week. Both Allie and Jeff were there, along with lots of local government councillors and mayors who were passing resolutions on policy, and in many cases appealing to higher levels of government for help. Perhaps the biggest topic, healthcare, the collapse of the system, and particularly its impact on small rural communities where when an ER is closed for days at a time and an ambulance is down or delayed, you're spending quite a bit of time driving to another community. It's different in Victoria and Vancouver to just drive to another hospital or wait, but in Clearwater or Ashcroft, that can be a very worrying thing and a crisis. So Health Minister Adrian Dix getting a rough ride on a panel with some of the rural mayors. He didn't have any new announcements to make. He did have a number of statistics to present, which is not unusual for the minister. Jeff, government getting a lot of heat on this healthcare crisis. Did this week make it any better or worse, or what did you take away from it?
My takeaway is that I think the government may have underestimated the interest of mayors and councillors in speaking on health while they're in the middle of an election campaign and they're hearing on the doorsteps from constituents that they're concerned about access to doctors and wait times in ERs and ambulances arriving not fast enough in certain cases. I think the government would counter that that the meeting of local governments is not the place where they make healthcare announcements, that in fact they very recently signed collective agreements with healthcare unions that lay out a path for investment in healthcare and addressing the challenges that are being faced in local governments. So commitments to hire thousands new workers, more money in the pockets of workers, more work-life balance to address issues of burnout that are causing a lot of the staff shortages. And they didn't want to wait on that for a convention to announce it. It's about getting things done for people, not getting attention for themselves. But it was not an easy ride for the minister. I will certainly acknowledge that.
It sounded like Minister Dix did have something potentially he was going to say or announce on ambulance service. He mentioned to media that the death of the Queen caused a sort of weird blackout period for the government on certain things it couldn't announce, and that got caught up in that. And so he went in without anything to mayors who had questions and didn't find that particularly appetizing, that the minister had very few solutions. Allie, rural mayors now are banding together. There's, I believe, more than 30 local governments in this kind of small community alliance who are hoping that their voice is louder to the province when they're talking about ambulances and ERs and the particular impact on smaller communities. Do you think that's going to work in lobbying for their case? And do you think government is listening to that?
Oh, absolutely. Conferences like this is where we build these groups, where we build these coalitions, where we can have these discussions. And so this was the perfect time for them to build a little bit of awareness on what their issues are. And I thought that the Dix panel was a really great place for that conversation starter. I will say, though, that I think to Jeff's comment about making an announcement at a conference like this, I think this is the time to do it. We're all here. This is the moment where we can have those discussions quickly, because we don't have the time to fly to Victoria, have these meetings, draw this process out. We need action now. And if not now at conferences like this, then when? So I think this is going to be really exciting for the rural municipalities to start this conversation and move forward. They're very clear on what they need. We need more ambulance service and first responders in our rural communities. Driving 2 hours may not be the option for some people. Flying into Vancouver, that it's practically impossible. And I think the Ashcroft story, where there was someone who passed away right in front of an ambulance station, really hit us hard in BC. So I think we're all kind of tuned into this.
Mm-hmm. And it feels like on that issue that government has made moves. Jeff, I don't know if you want to jump in on this. They have made moves. We did last year get an overhaul of the ambulance system that everyone praised as being good to convert different ambulance stations from on-call to 24/7, hire more people. And we're kind of at that weird point now. The government's put a bunch of money in, made a bunch of changes, and it's not working. And we heard from mayors this week when I were talking to them that they feel government is very defensive about this. They're trying to point out, look, I know you've done a lot, but you need to change it and do a little bit more. The reality on the ground is different. And they felt that Minister Dix took it very personally and felt like they were attacking him. And that's kind of led to this sort of tension between all sides at something like that. I don't know, Jeff, if you, when government has to alter something that they've done and put a lot of effort into, is that more difficult than just starting, to come up with a solution from scratch a year ago? Or is it harder to change a course when it's not quite working out?
I think if there's any frustration, I think it's frustration with a sense of, we didn't get to where we're at all of a sudden out of nowhere. I think we spent a lot of time in the province coasting on healthcare because things were good, and we didn't make the kinds of long-term investments we needed to make sure that healthcare would be there for us when we need it. And I think back to the previous government did some really good things, and particularly on ambulance, George Abbott, and community paramedicine. That was very good, but there was not the investment in training and recruitment and fleet and government. I think the ministers may be frustrated that we're continuing to play catch up and we still have a ways to go. I will only say on the issue of going back to why wouldn't you make an announcement at this kind of event where there's local government. I think the government didn't want to wait, and so they had signed a deal with health unions that commits the government to addressing a lot of these issues, and they didn't want to wait just to get attention, make a splash at a convention. So there you have it.
Allie, you spent several days there. Both you and Jeff were at UBCM in Whistler. What other big topics did you hear on the convention floor, kind of think that were interesting, might have political implications outside of that room?
Not something that I heard, but something that I think was omitted from this year. It's very interesting. So we're obviously in an election year civically in BC. And my observation is that crime and safety are the number one platform policy issues all across the board, whether that's Vancouver, Victoria, to Dawson Creek, into our smaller communities. Crime and safety is an issue that everyone's talking about. Yet we didn't really talk about crime and safety. It wasn't really prominent in the 4 resolutions or much of a topic of conversation amongst delegates here. So I thought that was interesting because it doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in communities.
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, you hear mayors talk about it all the time. Not just the issue of unhoused people needing more shelter spaces and resources, but we have random attacks occurring that are scaring people. We have clear mental health and addictions crises on the street that are leading to disruptions and vandalism and safety concerns from people. But and it's a topic of conversation for sure, but it didn't seem to come up much at the meeting for sure. Jeff, did you hear anything on that? And why isn't that more of a discussion, do you think?
I think maybe the reason why it wasn't brought up at the convention is that there is already a working group of local government and provincial government looking at these issues to find creative solutions to and not so creative solutions to these issues. And I think the next big milestone in this whole issue and debate will be at the conclusion of those discussions. And it'll be interesting to see whether the local governments are satisfied with what the provincial government is prepared to do or not. And so that will be a inflection point. 3 very, very quick things that I noticed at UBCM that I thought were interesting. Nathan Cullen gave a great speech. Nathan Cullen, Minister of Municipal Affairs, announced $62 million for a new water treatment facility in Abbotsford, which was well received. And he was just very dynamic and connected with the audience and got a standing ovation at the end. I even saw Sonia Furstenau stand up and give him a standing ovation. I think she was being polite.
Way.
I don't think she's.
Really?
I think she's. So there's hope for politicians. If we can all get along, that would be great. I also noticed a lot of people dunking on the city of Vancouver and the delays at city council and the stupid long meetings that they have all the time and how they get nothing done. I think every political leader in every party pointed that out. So huzzah for them, because I agree with them on that. The last point, and this is probably the most important one for you, Rob, is that I bumped into the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Raj Chouhan, and I asked him, where are things at on the legislature, Cat? And
yes.
I said, it's time to get this done. Get the parties together. Where's the progress? You said some nice words, but what are you going to do? And he said, have you been talking to Rob Shaw? Couldn't believe it. Come on, Speaker, let's make this happen. All party agreement. It's a good first step. We'll get a dog eventually, but let's start with that legislature, Cat.
I love it. I love the legislature, Cat. It's going to bring people together. I'm not going to say it's going to solve all of the problems in BC politics, but let's, even conservatively, 99% of the problems out the window the moment there's a cat there and everyone's petting the cat and giving it treats and the cat's walking around. It's going to be fantastic. I think there's a cat committee that is being called this fall in the session to figure out where it would sleep and eat and who would pet it and how it would get the name. So I'm glad that you are keeping the pressure. I actually heard anecdotally that lots of people were talking to the Speaker about it there too. So that's great.
Allie, did you talk to the Speaker about this?
You know what? No, I did not. And I don't know how I feel about this legislature, Cat.
What?
Oh no, would you prefer a legislature dog?
Here, let me just quickly point out that taxpayer dollars are now going to have to go to the legislature, Cat.
That's better than to MLAs. All right, you're right. I mean, there is, maybe people can fundraise privately to buy the cat food or something like that. I feel
a little better about that.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Thank you, both of you, for being here, and thank you for watching us each and every week on Check News. We're also on the Check Plus app if you're looking for past episodes, and we will be back next week for all the latest here on BC Politics on Political Capital.